Part 2. Christian marriage requirements. Historically, there were 9 Christian marriage requirements. Besides one man and one woman, 1. Couples needed 2. An official to marry them, a legal tribune. 3. Parental approval. 4. Death to us part lifetime commitment. 5. The development of love towards one another. 6. Lifetime monogamy. 7. Procreation. 8. Men were obligated to financially support their wife and children, without which men were deemed infidels, and head the household, while women had to be industrious homemakers who disciplined the children. 9. Parents were also expected to guide their children in the faith, men being the family's religious head. Besides neglecting to pass on their faith, couples today often attempt to amalgamate 2 divergent religions. Either one person quits their faith or both religions suffer negation. Or a Christian marries a non-Christian, and it destroys their Christianity. Besides, raising a family is a full-time job. Candidates for marriage must be willing to make great compromise, self-sacrifice, and permanent commitment. Since straight society generally fails on 8 points, most are discredited when criticizing homosexuals who correctly state that Jesus never explicitly condemned same-sex marriage, though he implicitly excluded it, while explicitly condemning divorce and remarriage. Same-sex marriage was illegal longer than straight, so-called no-fault divorce, because percentage-wise, so-called gays are far fewer. Heterosexual no-fault divorce was legitimized because percentage-wise heterosexuals predominate, not because of moral superiority. Man-woman relations may be naturally productive, like seeds planted in gardens and plugs inserted into sockets, while same-sex relations are non-productive. However, if all you've got is poison ivy, or plug a 120-volt appliance into a 240-volt outlet, you have worse than nothing. You have a disaster. Before criticizing someone else, we must be exemplary. Again, contemporary marriage is in ruins. And again, historical marriage was often faulty. Therefore, marriages must be based on both historical and Christian or other strong religious principles. Instead, Christian believers chose to point at homosexuals, a red herring, to divert attention from their own problems. So, if you plan on marrying, you should know everything about your potential mate before connecting in today's climate. Supposed solutions to marriage problems. Some say that living together before marriage solves the divorce problem. I quote, so they can know one another to understand what they're getting into, or quote unquote practice. Rubbish! When cohabitation was almost unheard of, divorce was very rare. People who saved themselves for marriage had lower divorce rates than those who had not. Today, those living together before marriage have an 80% higher divorce rate than those who don't. Young women should never acquiesce to premarital sex with their boyfriend. Sex is very serious, involving the likelihood of bringing new life into our world. If young men have sufficient love, maturity, and stability for such intimacy, they should also be ready for marriage. Marriage counseling is available today, but the divorce rate remains high. While marriage counseling was unavailable in yesteryear, yet divorce was rare. So much for marriage counseling. Having children does not help prevent divorce either. It may cause increased stress, increasing the likelihood of divorce. Putting away selfishness, not being a quitter, and respecting marriage's sanctity would solve the divorce problem and problems within marriage. Contraception. Marriage was profitable until the early 20th century. Amidst agricultural and horticultural society, children worked on their parents' farm, helping run the family business. Today, farm jobs are scarce because sophisticated machinery does the work of 100 farmhands, putting men out of work. And most well-paying jobs now require college degrees, and tuition is terribly expensive along with other exorbitant costs. Having children has become a money pit. Considering today's radically different circumstances, couples remaining childless or using contraception is understandable, although it's inconsistent with historical Christian practice. Many people can afford marriage but not children. Insisting that all couples produce children unduly burdens poor men, and by denying marriage, people fornicate instead. Fornication is sex outside of marriage, making it an unholy act. according to Christianity. By foregoing contraception, some people have abortions instead. Others have children they cannot care for, while Scripture damns parents who don't care for their children. Then many of those children go on to make the world a worse place. And what if it eventually costs $50 million just to teach your child to blow his nose? Then nobody should ever get married? That's unworkable. Then there's the insurmountable overpopulation problem. Although the historic church always condemned artificial contraception, surely they did not intend to encourage the breeding of vast numbers of non-Christians, violence-prone people, and non-productive people who leech off the welfare system and prevent Christians themselves from affording children, which happens today. They likely opposed contraception to ensure that Christians would produce more productive Christians. For those who oppose artificial contraception, know that women can only get pregnant on certain days of the month. Therefore, it's possible, though difficult, to track a wife's cycle and thereby enjoy relations while never using artificial contraception and never facing pregnancy. Furthermore, millions of women throughout today's world can never have children, often due to a hysterectomy. So in light of modern science, we now know that marriage is not just for producing children. Childless marriages are a sensible option. Solution to marital problems. Summarily, patriarchal Jewish and Christian historical constructs had 5 major responsibilities for each spouse, which held marriage together. Wives were responsible to provide meals, had the foremost responsibility of home maintenance, had to regularly provide sex, had the foremost responsibility of raising the children, and had to support their husbands' decisions. Husbands were responsible for financially supporting their wife, children, and home, cherishing their wife and supporting her emotionally, being the family's physical protector, willing to die for his family if necessary, taking on all projects requiring strenuous physical labor, and decision-making leadership within families. Although marriage was never a fairy tale experience, it worked. To maintain healthy marriages, preachers and social workers plead with people to respect and love each other. Pled and plead today. This is and it was a stopgap solution, like the legendary Dutch boy who put his finger in a leaking dam to stop his village from being destroyed by flooding. It won't work for long because of humanity's fallen nature. Changing the laws to eliminate so-called no-fault divorce and other social ills is required. Disallowing divorce except for cases of adultery, legally enforcing historical Christian conduct, and repudiating feminism is mandatory.